Hey, this is John Leon Guerrero. Our guest today is Anthony Zuiker. He's an author as well as a writer and producer of television. I probably should have led with the TV part because he created the most successful television franchise in history, CSI. In case you need some quantifying, the franchise that is the original CSI, CSI Miami, CSI New York, and CSI Cyber has a total of 797 episodes that aired in 200 countries with an audience exceeding 2 billion viewers. His books include the Level 26 series, and there were 3 of those, Dark Origins, Dark Prophecy, and Dark Revelations. The latter was released as an iPad app, but all 3 were a multimedia experience. His other 2 were Murder in Mystery Manor and a memoir titled Mr. CSI, How a Vegas Dreamer Made a Killing in Hollywood One Body at a Time. Zuiker was born in Blue Island, Illinois, in the same hospital as CSI New York star Gary Sinise, who Pete and Scott coincidentally got to hang out with this week. Anyway, when he was 6 months old, his family moved to Las Vegas, where his mother worked as a blackjack dealer. That plays into much of his work, including his latest, which is a graphic novel and planned 4-part miniseries called One-Eyed Jack. It's about the 2017 Las Vegas mass shooting at the Mandalay Bay Hotel. He tells the story with a deck of cards, inspired partly by his Las Vegas upbringing and by the Tex Ritter song Deck of Cards. Pete and Scott got to sit with him and talk about his new passion that has consumed his gargantuan imagination, so you're in for a doozy. Hey, you know what else is a doozy? Pete in a Sunga. And he's climbing into one for the Coronado SEAL Memorial Swim. It takes place on Saturday, September 21st, and benefits the families of Naval Special Warfare operators who have made the ultimate sacrifice in defense of our freedom. This organization deserves your support if you can give it, and you'll find them at SEALVeteransFoundation.org. Once again, SEALVeteransFoundation.org. And if you don't have any bread to give or miles in you to swim, go to the website anyway and just check them out. Also, punch us up a 5-star rating on iTunes if you're feeling frisky, and talk dirty to us by writing a little review about Pete and that Sunga. I'm just kidding about the Break It Down show. We'd really appreciate that as well. But don't let me get distracted. I'm here to introduce you to a guest we're really excited about. We're huge fans of his work. And just admit it, you are too. Here along with Pete and Scott is Mr. CSI and now Mr. One-Eyed Jack, Anthony Zuiker.
Hello, Kickstarter. My name is Anthony E Zuiker. I am the creator of the most successful television show in the world, CSI, Crime Scene Investigation. I grew up in Las Vegas most of my life. Vegas is in my blood. I went to school here, grew up here, made my bones here. On October 1st, 2017, my town, Las Vegas, got hit hard. A lone gunman took the lives of 59 people, including his own. The Las Vegas massacre by gunfire was the worst in American history. Stephen Paddock shot up my town, shot up my people. The good citizens of Las Vegas came out in droves to show love and support. Hashtag Vegas Strong. And the powers that be, well, they pawned it off like it never happened. They forgot about the innocent lives that were lost. They forgot about how 82 children from the shooting didn't have their parents for Christmas in 2017. They forgot about the ones who survived but still suffer to this very day. I never forgot. One-Eyed Jack is a protest graphic novel designed to raise political and social issues in our country. It's a graphic novel about that shooting, as told by a deck of cards. The Devil, King of Spades. The Grim Reaper, Ace of Spades. Queen of Hearts, Lady Luck. And the shooter, Stephen Paddock, the One-Eyed Jack. 52 characters and 2 jokers, designed to tell the truth about what really happened on that fateful day. The day a monster took his revenge on the night came in more than one form. And the deeper I went, the more I had to ask the tougher question. Who is the real monster in this story? This isn't just a graphic novel of protest about the people who run our town, run our country, run our world. This is a deeper commentary about humanity, about who we are, what we are, and if this kind of killing continues, we will eventually become monsters in our own right. One-Eyed Jack, a graphic novel of protest about the most deadly shooting in American history.
Lions Rock Productions.
This is Jay Moore.
This is Greg Proops.
This is Jordan Harbinger.
This is Dexter from The Offspring.
This is Nathan
This is
East.
Sebastian Younger.
This is Rick Marotta.
This is Stuart Copeland.
This is Mick Gillette.
This is Andy Summers.
Hey, this is Skunk Baxter.
This is Gabby Reese.
This is Rob Bell.
Hey, this is John Leon Guerrero.
Hey, and this is Pete A. Turner.
And there you have it. Kickstarter campaign of the century called One-Eyed Jack, about the most deadly massacre in American history in terms of gunfire. I'm Anthony E Zuiker, creator of the CSI franchise, Crime Scene Investigation, and we are on the Break It Down Show.
And now, the Break It Down Show with John Leon Guerrero and Pete A. Turner.
Yeah, holy shit.
Yeah, no. Made it happen.
Scott made it happen. He's producing and co-hosting with me. And not the first time we've recorded at a Barney's Beanery, so thanks to those guys, as always.
Kind of my movie stomping grounds. That I would have, they allow me to go down there and write movies until they open up the lunch area. So this is my writing haven here in 3rd Street Promenade.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is going to be a cool episode because we're kind of going to, I mean, we could talk for episodes and episodes and episodes about Anthony's career and all the success he's had in Hollywood and writing, but we're going to talk about something like a real special episode on today's pod, and something that's really close to Anthony's heart because he's a Vegas boy, born and raised, and I think you're like an LA transplant.
Well, pretty much. Born in Blue Island, Illinois, and the same exact hospital as Gary Sinise, ironically. So you can imagine how that pitch went when I sat down with him in Calabasas to pitch him CSI New York. Ironically, we both were born in the same hospital. We're both from Blue Island, Illinois. My mother actually babysat him as a youngster, and we knew his family on Sagamon Street. So when I dealt him those cards in that early interview, he was sort of like ready to sign with Anthony Zuiker. The next thing you know, I said, hey, you stick with me for 5 seasons, I'll give you $25 million. And we actually went a bunch of seasons beyond that and became a very successul show. So we're thankful for Gary.
Yeah. And I was born in Illinois, too.
Yeah.
We're all homies.
They moved me to Las Vegas at 18 months old. So, I do contend that I'm from Las Vegas. I was there since 18 months all the way through. And today I'm 51 as of last week.
Let's dive in and talk about One-Eyed Jack and Kickstarter and why this was so important. I called you yesterday. I'm like, hey, let's get you on the pod. And you said, hey, let's do it tomorrow because I have this project I got going on. We need to drop this and we need to raise awareness for this. And that's what we're talking about. Bring it.
Hey, this is Pete. Real quick, I just want to let you guys know we are proud to announce our official support of Save the Brave, a certified nonprofit 501c3 with a charter of helping veterans with post-traumatic stress. Here's how you can help. Go to SaveTheBrave.com, click on the link on the website, and my recommendation is this. Subscribe. Give them $20 a month. You've got subscriptions that you can turn off right now that you're not using that are $20 a month. Swap that out. Get involved. Let's help these folks out.
I called you yesterday. I'm like, hey, let's get you on the pod. And you said, hey, let's do it tomorrow because I have this project I got going on. We need to drop this and we need to raise awareness for this. And that's what we're talking about. Bring it.
Well, like I said earlier, this is my first Kickstarter campaign. We decided to sort of crowdfund this graphic novel called One-Eyed Jack. The story really begins probably when I was about 10 years old. This is about 41 years ago. My grandfather, Luis P. Del Negro, also in the service for the Navy, played a vinyl record for me at 10 years old. It was called A Soldier Story. And that particular story was sung by a gentleman in the 40s and 50s called Tex Ritter. And that particular song was about a soldier that walked into a church, and rather than grab a homonym, he would actually have a deck of cards. And the priest got mad at him and said, what are you doing there, young man? And the soldier said, well, sir, my homonym, my Bible is here in the deck of cards. You see, the ace of spades represents, that there's one God, and the 2 of hearts represents the Old and New Testament. And it was kind of a story about a soldier in a church using every single deck of card in the deck. I don't know why that stuck with me, but it stuck with me at 10 years old. And October 1st of 2017, when Stephen C. Paddock went to the 32nd floor and took out 58 people on that fateful night, I was compelled to want to do something about it because, in my opinion, I feel like I needed to tell that story because it was in my backyard and I needed to know everything. It was kind of like a forensic examination, psychological examination about what happened in my backyard. And I wasn't going to be seduced by the media and just say, well, you know what? It's, the lone wolf, the lone monster came and did that. And of course, what he did is monstrous. But, I'm the kind of person that's just not going to take what CNN says or something that I read in Yahoo as face value. I was going to take my sort of CSI mind and do a forensic analysis of this entire shooting, looking at every angle going in. And I knew right away it'd be through the use of a deck of cards. I knew there would be 52 characters and a Joker. And that's where it began. It really began with me going to 7-Eleven and saying, how much is a deck of cards? $4. Gave the guy a $5 bill. Sat in a coffee shop at a lake area, shuffled the cards up, threw down the One-Eyed Jack and said, that's the shooter, and threw down the Grim Reaper and said, you know what, that's the Ace of Spades, and threw down the King of Spades, that's the devil, Lady Luck is the Queen of Hearts, the little boy is King of Hearts, and I just kept going and going and going. So every day I'd sit down and write, literally you would see on the table at a coffee shop, you'd see 4 cards, and the next day I'd come back, you'd see 8 cards, all until I got to the 52nd and then 54th card with the 2 jokers was the story complete. No outline. It was just one of these emotional riffs of like, I'm going to read all the police reports, read every single article, talk to all my law enforcement friends, get all the inside scoop, listen to all the vlogs and podcasts, and then tell the story and answer things that nobody's answering, including the FBI. And that's how it all started.
What are you thinking when you're doing this as far as not only just being a storyteller and telling this is a really fucking important story to tell about the wins and losses? I get the sense talking to you yesterday that there were a lot of gaps in the information that the public doesn't have, and
the public may never have the gaps. Everything was very helter-skelter before, during the shooting. They didn't know where the shooter was coming from. They didn't know it was some elevated position. So that was very, very scary. There were missing computers that disappeared from Stephen Paddock's room. There was missing evidence that will never probably surface. And I get that, in the height of chaos, those type of things happen. But the interesting thing for me was this: I was a bellman at the Mirage Hotel. I did check in people in the service elevator. I know how this happens. I know what happens when an individual drives a car into parking in the back of the casino, and then you're able to sort of, have a bellman come out and assist you and bring up, multiple suitcases to a room through the service elevator, which is the elevator that's not seen by the public. Mm-hmm. So if you're a Barry Manilow, if you're a Bon Jovi, if you're a Barbara Streisand, somebody who doesn't want to walk through a casino and be gawked at, the bellman's going to bring you to the service elevator, and that's where Stephen C. Paddock was. He was bringing up, and this is a time of 2 things that you're not thinking about, right? This is a time where a bellman is not going to question how many bags you bring up there because you're just trying to get a good tip. So you're not going to start interrogating the customer and going, hey, what's in the bags? It's not your business, plus you get fired. Number 2, there are very, very strict laws as a bellman to not go past the D&D sign. What does that mean? Do not disturb sign. If you're a bellman and you use your pass key and go past a D&D sign, you're fired. End of story. $80,000 a year job goes away. So when you see a D&D sign on top of on a door, there's 2 things that aren't going to happen. The maid's not going to enter, and the bellman's not going to enter. And what happened was that D&D sign was up there for probably north of 5 days, and nobody was really checked the room. That's a conflicting report because I've also read that maids ran out of there about 20 times in that span. And the question becomes is, going in and out 20 times, nobody thought that all of that luggage was conspicuous because apparently, if there was 25 intrusions, past the D&D sign, which shouldn't have happened, they never once walked in and found guns on the floor. It was probably either A, all the guns were put away in the suitcases when Stephen Paddock wasn't in the room, out gambling and drinking, or B, nobody entered the room for 5 to 7 days. Now, Steve Wynn, of course, jumped on this, that he has different laws at the Wynn Hotel that after a day and a half, you make a mandatory intrusion. But those laws weren't in effect prior to shooting. So like 9/11, where we had to make some adjustments for the country's safety, in the end, passing D&D signs, those laws are now going to change for casinos. And 2, no one's going to question a service elevator because most likely that connotates a VIP guest. Yeah. And therefore, you're not going to ask questions, and that's how that happened.
You're like Robert Graysmith with the Zodiac Killer. Where you have all these details and you're putting them all together. In his era, it was hard for the police department to talk and collaborate. And there's all these different elements to the story. Do you find something similar where it's very siloed still? Or have we passed that point now and everybody's collaborating in a productive way?
Well, I mean, look, I'm the creator of the most successful television show in the world, CSI, Crime Scene Investigation. I made my bones on having a very good relationship with law enforcement. And I have a lot of respect for law enforcement. And I know that when somebody's in an elevated position at night, firing caliber .223 caliber bullets into a crowd without tracer bullets, it's very difficult when that's something brand new at night to figure out. So I thought law enforcement did an amazing job, boots on the ground, trying to communicate, putting themselves in danger while everybody was thinking it was fireworks, when obviously it was a mass shooting. And I told you yesterday, Scott, I thought some of the unsung heroes in that particular thing were definitely 911 operators. Those dispatch operators were definitely, from a sitting position away from the strip, able to coordinate as much as possible to have enough clarity for law enforcement to get in there and figure out that the shooter was from an elevated position, and therefore, got inside the casino, up to the 32nd floor. And by the time they got SWAT together to kind of like go in there, Stephen C. Paddock knew the wolf was at the door, and he went ahead and put a small caliber bullet right into his head and committed suicide before they breached in there. But law enforcement did an amazing job. Plus the civilians, obviously, that were taking injured civilians, throwing them in trucks, taking off, having people in barricades, taking cover. That was very, very heroic. In fact, one of my very good friends' wife had someone shot in the jaw right in front of her. She was actually in the VIP area on the right side of the thing. They saw people dancing in the middle, thought they should go there and party anyway. So they moved from the VIP, which is more expensive, to the middle area, which is right in harm's way of the shooting. She got shot in the jaw. She took her shirt off, put it on the jaw of the young lady, helped her over a wall to a truck, and went to safety. Didn't know who she helped. Turns out she goes to Facebook and says, I helped this lady. Can you help me? And people on social media put two and two together and actually reunited them.
Wow.
So when she went to the hospital to meet her for the first time, she couldn't talk because of her jaw, but was able to write, thank you for saving my life. And there's endless stories like that.
And I think that that's an important piece of it, too, that it goes largely unsung. And most people can't understand that the people in dispatch, you're literally in a room and you're trying to pull all these pieces of information and problem solve and have someone on the ground paint you a picture so you can provide resources and be a force supplier to not only get this guy to stop killing people from an unknown position at that time, and then also vector at the same time so many moving parts on what we refer to as the battlefield from a military perspective, and provide first aid and evac those people that have been shot and killed, and
mobilizing through mass chaos.
Yeah.
And how do you do that? I mean, you don't know what's going on. You don't know who's being shot. You see people on the ground, and you're taking coordinates from women who aren't there. Then you have to go ahead and penetrate that, keep people safe, find out where the shooter is, and be able to get mass people out of there. When don't forget, you're stumbling over boots and shoes and phones and purses and chairs, trying to get out of there on foot. It's mass hysteria.
I suppose I should say, too, for the audience, a lot of people have been to Vegas, but I live there. You can't appreciate the size of what we're talking about. So if you're down there by the concert responding and you do see a guy up, however many floors up, it's going to take you a while to get to him. Like, you're not going to be there in 2 minutes.
Well, number one, he took a small hammer and hammered two holes in the 32nd floor in his room. One was a hole from a vantage point to go ahead and shoot the crowd. The other hole was the vantage point to actually shoot the big fuel tankers across the street. I believe it's Executive Air, which is a private aviation strip. He was trying to blow that up. And thankfully, when a projectile goes into a large fuselage, it's not going to blow up like it would. I even talked to a military guy in Arkansas. I said, hell, I could shoot a propane tank that's full. It's going to go, tss. It's not going to go boom. Yeah. Thank God.
It's the vapor that explodes.
And I told Scott yesterday, we're everyone's really lucky of two things. A, this individual didn't have military experience, because had he had military experience, it might have been more of an accurate shot. And B, we're thankful that he couldn't get his hands on tracer bullets and tracer rounds, because had he been able to shoot every fifth bullet that shows you the trajectory of the bullet, he might have taken out a lot more than 58 people. From what they found, he did some kind of coordinates on what's called a dope scale, which is a little bit of a sort of like a hand calculation, mathematical of how to shoot. But those bump stocks are super unreliable, thank God. And, from him in that elevated position, he wasn't able to really be that accurate. We're fortunate that there wasn't 500-600 people dead that particular day, and only 58. So we're thankful about that.
More thankful, too, because this isn't just something we saw in mainstream media on the news. It's something that affects us personally, not just because you're from the city, but I'm removed. I live in Southern California, and I work out with a guy. He just happened to be at that concert, and I go to the gym, and he said I was ripping off my shirt and put it. So it reached people so far out. And you told me yesterday about the fact that, your own son was going to be at that venue. And so there's just...
I'll go into that, right? So the thing is, this is how things work. Thankfully, law enforcement did disclose in their police report, and there were two major reports that I devoured, both of them, because there's a lot of detail in there. But, his Stephen C. Paddock, you have to understand his background. Number one, his father is Benjamin Paddock, who is on the most wanted list for bank robbery back in the 60s. What you also may not know about Stephen Paddock is that he has a handful of brothers, and his father left him at 7 years old. So, as he grew up and worked for the post office and the IRS, Stephen Paddock was a bit of a recluse, but he was a numbers genius. He was an absolute, master at math. And, by doing that, he really was able to have a video poker system to come in and spend at least $3 million in a 24-hour period to kind of game the system. And he could probably grind out a couple $100,000. So he was, doing well for a long time. The question becomes is, at what point did it turn to where he would go ahead and take such, gruesome action on civilians? And that's something that I attempted to answer inside the graphic novel called One-Eyed Jack.
Well, I think just to put things in perspective, you came out, and I want to read this to, that night on October 1st at Mandalay Bay, there was a crowd of 22,000 people just laying in wait at the hands of this lunatic, and 58 killed, 422 wounded, injured 851, and fired 1,100 rounds that night into the crowd from a 32nd floor of the Mandalay Bay. And obviously the nation was shocked when this happened, but after the last recent tragedy in El Paso, and the numbers are growing in the hundreds over the last 2 years. And when they rolled the credits after this last episode I saw on NBC Nightly News one time, I started to tear up just at the fact that this is happening in our country. And we are so steeped in honoring what we do in the veteran community and those who are defenders of what we do. There's got to be a solution, and that's what we were talking about yesterday on the phone, and we were getting pretty animated about everything, and we said we weren't going to bash certain organizations and politics, but there's got to be a way for people who are committed to doing this. And you never wore a badge and a gun. You never served in the military, but you're taking a stand right now to try and make an improvement. And I think that that's common to everybody. It's not just some news flash that goes away. And what we talked about, how do we make it safer?
That's a macro issue, which we can kind of dance around a little bit today. The micro issue, going back to the shooting of my son, because I wanted to get back to that for half a second. The great thing about looking at somebody's search history online, it was very obvious in the police report that he was definitely contemplating this for a while. His searches consisted of how many people are on Santa Monica Beach, how tall is the Mandalay Bay, what is the date for Life is Beautiful concert on Friday. He did a lot of research, really trying to figure out the numbers, the trajectories. This was something he was hatching inside of his mind, for a long time. And also, one of my oldest sons was supposed to be at the Life is Beautiful concert. Stephen Paddock actually did rent a hotel room that was elevated above that concert on a Friday. And I remember because I was mad at my son for going there, and he was, got caught vaping and that kind of a thing. And here I'm mad at vaping, but, there could have been a situation where he was, lying right in the middle of the sniper
right in the kill zone,
scope in the kill zone with the killer. And for some reason, Stephen Paddock did abort that situation and didn't shoot up people at Life is Beautiful, and then opted to go ahead and, to the Mandalay Bay and do that. But yeah, I was reading an article about guns, about weaponry and shootings after the Vegas massacre, and the one thing that was brought that was interesting was Alexander Hamilton had a solution back in those days, which is he was trying to ask people who did possess weaponry to have the responsibility to watch other people who had weaponry and then be able to report if they felt anything was, hinting towards violence. And because of the collective mind share of people who possess weaponry or bear arms, there would be a lot more watchdogs that may be preventative. And I think that's an interesting practice in our country. Just that we kind of watch and check each other. There would be a system in place, rather than sort of like point a finger at the NRA or point a finger at gun control laws or point a finger at Trump. The thing is, we have to just devise a system to where, as an American, we have the right to bear arms. But if we live on the fringe at the expense of killing children and killing human beings with specific weaponry that should never be in the hands of people, we have to address that. And it's really something that people shouldn't be arguing about. Because if not, it feels like in the Kickstarter video I did, you'll see that a year ago, we had March for Your Lives with the 5 individuals from Marjory Stoneman Douglas when they had the shooting in Parkland, Florida. And then a year later, the Time magazine cover is probably 100 different cities handwritten squished inside the Time magazine cover. And it leads me to believe, are we going in the wrong direction? Because last year was just shooting up a school with Nicholas Cruz. This year, it's endless cities. If it's not a garlic festival, it's El Paso. And at some point, we have to have a turning point or because the one thing I've always said out loud to my children is every regime has fallen from the Romans. And the regime that I live in, the United States of America, is the greatest regime in the world. And I bleed red, white, and blue. And I really want to figure out a way to at least provoke a conversation with One-Eyed Jack so we begin to effectuate change. And at worst, maybe a young person picks up a pencil, starts writing, starts drawing, and starts taking a position to make this country a nickel better than it was yesterday.
So when you look at solutions and the planner's advantage, I mean, that's the thing you have to get over, right? Someone just gets to live in that. The only thing I can think of that really works is to give up some privacy and some freedom and allow the NSA and those government agencies to have access to Google, Amazon, all that information that comes through, those searches ahead of time. That works in some things, like Timothy McVeigh blows up Oklahoma City and they start tracking purchase patterns of certain materials, right? So these things happen. Are we willing to give up that much freedom to allow, to trust the government to identify and accept the cost that there's going to be some they're going to miss on some people and identify them as being potential shooters and ruin lives because of that.
Okay, so let's talk about that for half a second. So let's be obvious. The second you saw the Columbine shooting, did any voice say to yourself in the back of your mind, there's going to be more of these? Because it certainly did for me.
Yeah, absolutely.
The second Columbine happened, it's like, well, there you go. That's possible.
It was a Pandora's box that had been opened.
And when Stephen Paddock goes to the 32nd floor and has 27 weapons and hundreds of thousands of rounds of ammunition and shoots from an elevated position and kills 58 people, didn't you say to yourself, well, that's beginning of things to come?
Yeah.
My point being is as we escalate and get new inventive ways to kill people by gunfire, it umps the ante of what's possible and can it get worse? I'm telling you right now, this graphic novel may publish May of 2020, and I tout that as the most, the deadliest shooting in American history. But am I going to make 58 before this publishes, or is it going to be 72 next month, or 104? Is someone going to be on a helicopter when the Raiders play in Vegas and shoot from an elevated position with four guys disgruntled from the service and fire into a crowd?
Yeah.
I hope it never happens. But the point being is, as the media shows you what's possible, as social media shows you what's possible, as we take, little pieces of information, play them over and over and over and over and over again for people, it just breeds new ideas for more massacres.
Right.
So do I want to give up a little bit of rights? Sure. If it'll at least try to curb, the direction that we're going, which is these mass shootings.
I think Pete brings up a good point about, do we tune up or put the gas on government agencies and local law enforcement to take more away from you? And what I hear from you is what we need is us policing our own and extra sets of eyes, because the government can only do so much, and they are going to miss stuff, and they're going to be the first ones to be blamed when there's a miss. And they're never going to be rewarded for all the successes because we don't publicize the successes, but it really takes the individual actions. What we were talking about on the phone yesterday was having the balls to just use that cliche adage at airports that we learned from 9/11.
Yeah.
See something, say something. Everyone is such a fucking pussy. They're like, that doesn't smell right. And if it looks like shit and it smells like shit, it's probably shit. And people aren't willing to pick up the phone for fear of retribution or false reporting or whatever the case may be. And there's so many things. I'm that guy. And they're like, I may be the one that what a dick. But, I'm going to say something. And I think that
no one's going to convince me ever in this world that Stephen C. Paddock, that nobody around his inner circle had any idea that he had an inclination of doing this.
Just the forensic things you were talking about, the bed and where was he sticking the guns? In most hotel beds, they have a base around the bottom. You can't even put shit under beds.
Yeah.
Well, he was moving couches, he was moving sort of horseshoe couches together to kind of house the guns so he had easy access. But, anybody who knows anything about weaponry and firearms from the military knows it was complete amateur hour in terms of what he was trying to do. But, the bad part about that is it does plant the seed of what's possible. So if you have somebody who's more seasoned at weaponry, that wants to have a vendetta against innocent people will be a better, more informed shooter. And I think those are the things, look, the government can only do so much. The FBI is buried. The CIA is buried. The number one thing is terrorism and domestic terrorism. They're so overwhelmed. And they thwarted, look, they're in the positive thing, they've thwarted 3 shootings in a row, 3 suspects that were going to go out and shoot that same week. And they stopped all those killings. But law enforcement isn't going to be enough. I do think that whoever has people's ear who bear arms, that loudest voice can help be contributory to say, hey, our duty as U.S. citizens is to keep a vigilant eye out and if something smells weird or is weird, or if there's a lot of stockpiling of weapons that you feel could be, beyond the scope of just simple collection,
Yeah.
Then maybe it's just something that there's a way to at least put the word out, to keep an eye on. Right now, social media is the curse of it is it gives you too much information you probably shouldn't be having. The blessing of it is some people make the mistake of go ahead and preemptively putting things on there before they take action, and then they're thwarted, which I think is great. But the enemy, the terrorist, the bad guy, they're sometimes usually 5 steps ahead of us, and they're savvy.
Yeah.
And we have to. The only way we can overcome that is just in mass and collectively doing that.
This gets a lot of discussion too, Anthony, is talking about addressing the real problem. Are guns the problem or are people the problem? And you talk about treating the patient or you treat the problem. And you could cut the cancer out, but something else could be there. So let's use the example that people in certain cultures, they don't have weapons, and they found ways where even the individual who's sick-minded, that wants to do bad things, if they can't get their hands on the weapon, they've used trucks. They've used other means. They hijacked airplanes and drove them into buildings. I mean, if these people want to do it, how do we cure that problem?
Nicholas Cruz was a classic example. I think Emma Gonzalez said it best. The We Call BS young lady from Parkland. She said, if it wasn't a gun, it would have been a knife. It's like if it's, and the second that Osama bin Laden, planted that lone wolf business in everybody's head where it's like, hey, separate, don't hang out together in sleeper cells. Just go ahead in there and do your lone wolf act. That's really, really tough to stop. When you're walking across the street in Cannes in France and a guy has a white van hitting 80 miles an hour into 30 people, very hard to stop. And there's always going to be violence in the world. But I will say that I can't go on record today to say, are people the problem? Are guns the problem? The guns don't walk around themselves and shoot people without the assistance of humans. And human beings have to grab, a weapon to go ahead and do that. Like I said, I think the fringe is where the problem is. It's when you have automatic weapons and you ask yourself, what is the function of that beyond collection? I ask of you, what is the function of an automatic weapon?
We talked about that yesterday, and as someone that owns guns, I'm a licensed hunter. I've been in the military for over 24 years. Pete's military. We were talking about this yesterday. I find no legitimate purpose for having, and I've never gone on record saying this, and I have no problem doing it. I find no legitimate purpose for civilian population to have high-capacity magazines, to have automatic weapons, to file down sears in their weapons so they make them automatic. Because the example I gave to Anthony was, hey, look, man, if you're a hunter and you have to have a high-capacity magazine, you're a shitty hunter. You need to go to the range and learn how to shoot that weapon, because if I take more than one shot at large or small game, I feel that the deer won. I suck as a hunter, so I need to go to the range and dial in my weapon to be a responsible hunter. Yeah. If I own a handgun or a shotgun in my home because I have this whatever unfounded fear of a break-in or I just have a heightened awareness, which some people do. I'm not discounting that. They want to protect their family, their home, and they have that right under the Constitution. But again, if you need a magazine to do that, you've got a problem. If you can't hit the intruder with 1 or 2 shots and take out that threat, you are not trained using that tool properly, and that's a real problem. And so people that want to tout, NRA giving them credentials and I have the right to do this under the Constitution, you also have the responsibility to train yourself on that weapon, just like you do a car or a blender and in your kitchen.
Or perhaps there's somebody that's been assigned to you, or a group or some protocol, to make sure that you are adequately trained to use that weapon, just like you adequately have to pass a test to have a license to drive a car.
Yeah.
It's like, why don't they just sell grenades at Walmart? Why can't I use grenades at Big Bear and throw a grenade in the water and let it explode and the fish that bubble up take them, versus an actual rod and a treble hook?
Yeah.
My point is like, we have to have some rules and regulations about the end game of what we're trying to accomplish. And again, nobody's saying you should give up your weapons.
What are we trying to accomplish?
I like the certification piece, because I'm a huge supporter of certification, right? Because anything that requires technical aspects to it, and I'll use a couple examples, like in the military, if you're going to control an aircraft from 30,000 feet, you have to be certified. And with certification entails an annual or semi-annual recertification to make sure you are still proficient at controlling a plane that's going to drop a 500-pound bomb. Or if you're a paramedic, you have to take CPR training every 4 months, and you have to demonstrate proficiency with that skill. And just to buy a gun and say, yep, I own a gun, and there's no certification.
Okay, so let's take gun shows, for example. I was in Arkansas a couple days ago interviewing a young man. I saw tons of billboards for gun shows. I've never been to a gun show myself. When you go there, are you allowed to go there and buy weapons? You are, right?
Yes.
You can put money
And
down.
ammo.
And ammo. And is there a serial number or something that's linked to that?
Still a wait, still a registration and requirement process for that, except for certain weapons which are antiqued weapons that are usually like a single shot, shotgun. Or,
Things that aren't going to be.
Yeah, things that aren't.
It's hard to please everybody. This really isn't a church and state issue, right? The thing is, our country was built on a right to bear arms. I think that's really, really important. But there are certain weapons, and there are certain people that shouldn't be possessing weapons that can go out and do bad things. And we were seeing it time and time again. Nobody could argue it. It's happening in our country every week. The question becomes is how do we, as a nation, do what we can to put protocols in place, not restrictions, but protocols in place and some restrictions to where we can at least curb the percentage of putting a weapon into a person's hand that is out to do harm and kill other humans. And I don't think anybody from the NRA, anybody anywhere would really argue that. Nobody wants that for anybody.
Yeah.
Well, let's
Right?
talk about that a little bit, because we touched on it. About the NRA, the power and the voice they have, and how you're writing this story, One-Eyed Jack, is important, and how you could maybe influence a massive organization that has huge lobbying power, huge following, to use their voice for good, to maybe change the narrative a little bit.
I don't have any dog in the NRA fight. I'm not a card holder. I don't really have a judgment one way or the other. What I will say is that if you're the strongest voice for people who bear arms, then what can we do to maximize that voice for good to protect the country?
Hey, this is Pete A. Turner from Lions Rock Productions. We create podcasts around here, and if you, your brand, or your company want to figure out how to do a podcast, just talk to me. I'll give you the advice on the right gear, the best plan, and show you how to take a podcast that makes sense for you, that's sustainable, that's scalable, and fun. Hit me up at pete@breakitdownshow.com. Let me help. I want to hear about it.
I don't have any dog in the NRA fight. I'm not a card holder. I don't really have a judgment one way or the other. What I will say is that if you're the strongest voice for people who bear arms, then what can we do to maximize that voice for good to protect the country? Are we doing everything we can to maximize, be a strong lobbyist, do what you have to do. I totally get it. I know there's a business there. I know there's lobby. There's money sloshing around. I totally get it. But there's a responsibility. I think, can we maximize the responsibility of the voice that's the loudest to help keep the country safe? For example, a parent probably has the strongest voice to their child in the house. Over the stepdad, over the nanny, over the dog, over the cat, over the neighbor, over the uncle. The parent has the strongest voice. My thing is, how do we take the messaging from a very powerful entity and do it for good to say, you know what, we stand by ourselves bearing arms. We stand beside that we don't want to have mass killings. And we are going to do everything we can to put system in place to minimize that happening because we have the strongest voice versus just pointing the finger and blaming them. That's the problem in our country right now, which is everyone wants to point a finger and go, it's that guy, it's that guy, it's that guy, it's that entity. The Las Vegas shooting wasn't just about a monster with a gun. I explored that graphic novel for one reason. I asked myself that the toughest question you can ask yourself, which is, who's the real monster? Is it really just a lone gunman? Or is there a system in place in the government that's deficient? Or is NRA not doing all they can to stop this? Or is there security protocols in the casino that wasn't there? Or is there a bump stock company that was complicit in making a semi-automatic to an automatic? Because what my research says, bump stocks went past the ATF protocol because they were designed to do a semi to an automatic weapon for people who were handicapped. And that's how it slid into the system. But now that's being abused and used for something bad like the shooting. And I just don't necessarily see a reason for why you'd have a bump stock, because you're converting it into an automatic weapon that could usually be designed to kill people. It's one thing to have an AK-47 automatic weapon that sits in a glass case for show. Awesome. But when you want to give somebody a turbo boost and a semi to go ahead and unload on humans, I don't know how that could possibly be something you could sell.
I want to go back to the question I asked earlier. What is the goal, do you think? Because we always have,
goal
22 veterans a day, down to zero. That's fucking impossible. You can't have zero suicides. You can't have zero drugs. So what do you think is the goal with this? Like, we're bad at defining our terms. A mass shooting, there's mass shootings every day. That's why the number is so high, because some guy goes into a house party and shoots people. Totally different thing than what this is, where a guy lays in wait how do we define our terms, and what's the goal?
The goal, there's a couple goals, right? One goal is we need to keep our country and our children safe from gunfire.
Right.
I don't think anybody argues that. I don't think anybody from the NRA, from the government, mom and dad, a civilian, a person visiting here, I don't think anybody, the masses don't want mass killings in this country or any country for that matter. So that said, I don't have to speak for myself, but it seems like we're picking up newspapers that have more and more mass shootings or shootings. And therefore, that says one thing to me. There's a flaw in the system that we are simply not addressing. And that could have been my son shot on the Friday at Life is Beautiful,
right.
And then that's a boy I can't get back by gunfire, right? Only thing I can do as the creator of CSI, I'm not going to run for president. I'm not going to battle the NRA. I'm not going to be a crusader. I tell stories for the Globe. I've made a living off of CSI, which shows violence, which shows gunfire. But I have to have that to do the most important thing of what I do, which is be able to come in and say, on the worst day of your life, there are people out there that will scrutinize the evidence, solve the crime, and bring peace of mind to the survivor and put the bad guy in jail. And that's a message that's profound and prolific in every country around the world, but 6 that our show plays on.
Afghanistan and Uzbekistan.
Afghanistan, Uzbekistan, North Korea. It's the whole thing. So I'm not trying to be on my soapbox here, but as a storyteller, all I could really do when I saw that shooting in my backyard is sit down and start writing, and sit down and start drawing, and try to inspire people to have a conversation about mass shootings, and possibly through conversations, maybe there could be a solution. That's really all it's about. And that's why it's such an important graphic novel.
For sure, important work. And these are big. I mean, it's unfair to ask you to have the answer to what's the goal. But that is the conversation we have to have as a community. And it can't be worried about this one particular thing that has political influence. It's not about a political problem. It's a people problem. It's a societal problem. And these are multivariate problems. And if you attack one variable, you don't get the result you want. We're bad at that.
Well, I mean, look, here's what I always hear. And I think this is what frustrates me and frustrates a lot of people, right? The second there's a mass shooting and somebody puts a microphone into a congressman's mouth, or a senator's mouth, the first thing out of their mouth is, now's not the time.
Yeah.
Right? Let's table this. Let's talk about it later. And what happens is it just doesn't get talked about, discussed, and nothing really changes. I think since the Vegas shooting, if I'm not mistaken, the biggest move forward was the ban of bump stocks. Did that happen? They passed that legislation?
Yeah, it has been modified.
And that's like an easy one.
Yeah.
Right? We're no longer going to allow grenades in the lake for the fishing.
Yeah.
It's an easy one to.
Well, and let's be honest, you have to have a license to wax vaginas. So, I mean, you need a license for that.
Well, look, I'm a big fan of Knott's Berry Farm, but if you go buy a beer there, they're going to look you in the eye and say, sir, I'm going to ask you 2 questions. Number 1, is this your ID?
Yeah.
Yes. Number 2, are you over 21? Yes. I mean, you think getting a beer there, you're at a proctology exam. It is unbelievable. And if you're going to go that far to sell me a 12-ounce beer for $16, I got to think when it comes to mass shootings, we can get it together as a country. We're a pretty smart country, but what we can't do is put our head in the sand, not talk about it, blame everybody but the problem, go ahead and give a mass shooter a label of a monster so we feel better about ourselves. But if you want to look at it forensically, they cut open his brain right in half at Stanford. There wasn't a lick wrong with him. Now, there wasn't really an extended, I think it's called psychopathy or psychopathy on him. But there wasn't anything in that frontal lobe that says, he's a monster.
Unlike the Texas shooter up in the tower, he's like, there's something wrong in my head. And then he went and shot everybody. And there was something wrong in his head. Different story.
Sure. But, the FBI necessarily didn't jump on motive as clear as they could have. And, of course, it's speculation without all of the evidence and the facts. But in my opinion, when you have a system of gambling, of video poker, to where you're spending $3 million in 24 hours to go ahead and eke out a couple $100,000, and next thing you know, that system doesn't work, and you're losing most of your net worth over the course of 2 or 3 years, that could enrage an individual. And when your father leaves you at 7 years old, and your father was a legacy of the FBI most wanted bank robber in the 60s, and you've now lost all your money to Las Vegas, it's not a big stretch of the imagination that you would go ahead and bring 28, 30 weapons with tons of ammunition and just take it back out on the casino and go out in a blaze of glory. That's not a big stretch for motive for me. And that's one of the positions I take in the book, which is the reason why I took that stance with Stephen Paddock is I needed to look at the totality of his life, not just the monster and put him in a category and move on to tomorrow, but to see who he was, how he grew up, what was his upbringing, where did his father go, what was the legacy his father left behind, about Stephen's mother, how he grew up, everything about that until the shooting. At least I had a better idea as to what would be the motive, because I just don't want to just take an article's point of view that says everybody should think he's this. I'm not saying we're having sympathy for him.
Yeah.
But he is a human being that did wrong, and I want to know everything about him as to how that happens to an individual.
Do you think criminality is heritable then?
Well, it wasn't about. I don't think there was a gene that was passed on. I think what was passed on was a legacy that he wanted to top.
Okay.
It's kind of like, you know what? Fuck you, Dad. You were FBI most wanted in the '60s. I'll do you one better. Rat-a-tat-tat. Next thing you know, we're down 59 people in Las Vegas. I don't think it's more complicated than that.
Would it surprise you if there was a genetic package that...
I've read in my research of CSI that there is a thing called a blue gene.
Okay.
Not denim, but a blue gene that could be passed on. It's kind of a killer gene. That's very possible. But it wasn't like, Stephen Paddock's been killing since he was 17, and now he's 50 and doing it. I mean, he snapped quietly in his mind, and then he figured it all out and went out in a blaze of glory.
I like why you talk about the monster, and you can go from the micro and kind of to the macro. Is the monster just one guy? Is it his surroundings? Is it the bump stock? And I was looking at my assistant's research on this, like, they're banned in 2006 and classified as a machine gun, but there's still over 500,000 in circulation. So if you want to get a hold of bad stuff, thank God for America, because you can get your hands on anything in America.
Look, we could take every gun out of people's houses tomorrow and have one big bonfire, but then that black market's going to be the happiest market in the world. You're going to see the dark web go crazy.
Yeah.
You make Amazon look like Romper Room overnight. So it's like, the guns aren't going to be going away anytime soon.
No, they exist.
Black market's going to be here, or you're going to get them at the gun show in Arkansas. Either way, it's happening. But the best safeguard, still in my opinion, I think is it's almost taking a page from the Chinese culture. The Chinese culture has been built to kind of keep your eyes on things. And they have a great self-regulatory system over there that's really interesting. I think we should just take a little bit of a page from that and just, and we've seen that with, in airports, if you see something, say something, being diligent on subways, like the guy running around dropping the rice cookers everywhere, the pressure cookers. People now know, hey, pressure cooker Subway, something's wrong.
Yeah.
You might have stumbled over that 10 years ago. Now I see pressure cooker, or I see a backpack, I'm telling somebody. Yeah. And I think that's where our country really, really wins, when you have diligence as a cohesive country where we're all looking for the same thing.
Absolutely. And it shouldn't take a mass shooting or Boston Marathon bombing with rice cookers or parking a couple planes into high-rise buildings. This is the discussion I've had multiple times, Anthony, is American hubris gets in our way because we refuse, because we see China or we see the Balkans or we see the Far East as something we don't want to adapt. But we're so afraid to take a certain page from their playbook to make ourselves better in certain areas. Not swallowing and mask their whole system. We don't want that. We don't want communism. We want to have freedoms. We want to be great. We want to be America. But if you're not thinking outside of the box, you're not willing to take a page from someone's playbook to address this certain deficiency in our culture. The example you gave, the Romans thought they'd be a pretty kick-ass empire. They lasted 500 years. We've been around for just over 240, and to think that it can't happen to us, we're wrong, because we have to stay vigilant in everything we do, politically, economically, socially, culturally.
I just think it's our responsibility.
Absolutely.
As an American.
Yeah.
Our responsibility as an American is to keep our eyes open, our ears open, and help protect each other. Protect our fellow man. Protect people that come to this country that aren't from this country. Protect every human being that's here. We're only as strong as our sort of like weakest link in this country. And it is our responsibility as an American. And the more that we can reinstill that is our responsibility, as a parent, your responsibility is to raise your child. Give your child boundaries. Stay consistent with your child. It's no different from what we have to do. It would be like us walking around and seeing rice cookers everywhere and backpacks and never saying anything and just ignoring it. If it blows up, it blows up. That's what we're going to lose as a society. When we actually are know to be diligent. I mean, when I walk across the street, I'm looking for white vans. When I'm in school, I got one ear out for a shooter. When I'm on an airplane and I see bags on the ground unattended, like they announce up there, I'm looking around. because not just I'm a CSI guy, but I now have a responsibility to do that. And it would be if everybody took one day and said, you know what, today is the day, National Get Your Head Out of Your Fucking Ass Day. Okay, we're going to actually be diligent. You would, for like 30 straight days, you might see a big decline in things happening when we're all just diligent. And I don't think it's a big thing to ask.
It's an important thing to ask, and we have emphasis on other things like National Dog Day yesterday. We're recognizing pets, and I'm checking my Instagram feed. I'm like, cute puppies. But this is something so important. But we don't want to see death, and we don't want to see important tasks when we go to pick up our iPhone. We want to see happy and dogs and girls in bikinis with guns and drop holsters, and that gets 40,000 likes. But something that you're talking about, which is so vital to the continued success, I don't know how we change that culture.
It wasn't my idea, man. Yeah. Alexander Hamilton had the idea, back in 1776. It was like the thing is, our forefathers had the idea.
Well, you're a writer. Nothing's original. You know that.
Yeah, we've had 250 years to kind of think about that. But I think, again, back to One-Eyed Jack, I want people to be able to do their homework. I want people to be able to look at all the angles. I want people to look at the sort of forensic evidence of the situation. Stop doing things that are comfortable, like just putting labels on people, labels on things and calling it a day. The dissemination of information in our country is so Mach speed. We tend to have a tragedy, and then by 2 days later, we're on to the next tragedy, and the tragedy that happened beforehand never really gets its due. It kind of just dies off in the ether. It's like vape smoke. It just kind of goes away. And as long as we continue to not look backwards and keep looking forwards and not addressing the malfeasance of what happens with these shootings, I think we're going to continue to pick up the paper and see a Garlic Festival shooting, an El Paso shooting, another school shooting, until something really, really changes. And I think, leadership in the country has to honor that, and when it becomes about votes, it becomes about money at the expense of human beings, that, to me, is the beginning of Rome going down. You know what I'm saying?
The Brits thought they had a great empire. The Romans thought they had a great empire.
And
let's talk about that.
I don't want to see
where the majority of the public, the over 330 million people that live in this country, get their news source, their information, their trusted advisors, the Fox, CNN, MSNBC. And you talk about these blips on the radar of tragedies, and then they fade away. And then we go right back to what's always on the topic on mainstream media, politics, and politicians talking about other politicians. What do you think about that? How do you sustain what's important?
Let's step it back one. Media. When my parents were younger, I remember being a paper boy. I remember throwing a paper onto a porch. I remember knocking on somebody's door to collect money for the paper. I remember selling so many papers, I got a free rope of licorice 8 feet long and beef jerky. Right? I was that guy. You knew that Saturday was great because the papers were small, but Sunday you were screwed so bad because you would fall.
Wrapping them. How do you wrap them?
And then if it rains, you're doing rubber bands and bags. Yeah. Right? So I've been there. But my point being is, Bernstein, Woodward, back Nixon, the journalism was awesome back then. It was really about something. There was real digging going on there. And then with technology, what happened, unfortunately, with media is the articles get smaller and smaller. They get more and more sensationalized. And I'll go on CNN, Yahoo, and I'll be reading something. I'm so into it, and all of a sudden there's ads under it, and it's over. Yeah. And I sit back and go, it's bad for a couple of reasons. When I look at these news apps, and I read them all every single morning at 4:00 in the morning, it is the most outrageous, violent, sensational, minimized, non-newsworthy or overly newsworthy, and there really just isn't a drill down about the full scope of what it is. And then they offer you a video that with over some elevator music that kind of gives you just a snapshot of that, and that, based on clicks, is how these news entities are surviving. And I just don't think that that's going to be anything's going to help anybody, because it is all like the worst of the worst, the most sensational of the sensational, the violent of the violent, the sex of the sex, and that's what journalism is. How do you even garner an opinion and take a position when things are so shortchanged like that? This is the problem with the violence with the cops and kids getting shot. They'll just show the shooting 1 million times to you without really the full story about it. And so it enrages people because they consume it in 10 seconds and then move on and go, that's what it is.
I don't know how you can differentiate what IGT does with slot machines and the news. It's really the same thing. Bing, bing, bing,
I have the answer for that. So International Game Technology has made a living, as has Las Vegas, in the gambler, because they're able to tap into that dopamine that your system needs. Yeah, I mean, look, you play video poker, you get jacks or better, get your money back. You're like, yeah, that's a win.
Sweet, yeah,
great. With media, it's like, let me just go ahead and lily pad. I could read 50, 60 articles really, really fast and kind of get my Kardashian high, my Trump high, my violence high, my Epstein high, and then you kind of move on. But nothing's really changed. There's not those provocative pieces that shape a nation.
Yeah.
I buy all these discs of like Kennedy speeches on vinyl and really look at what the writing was, even some of the Obama speeches. These are the kind of speeches that really define a nation. And I feel like, we've gone into a really bad position with our journalism. Don't think it informs the public in a way that could be empowering.
There's a lot of irresponsible reporting that the sources aren't checked, and just because the story is about President Trump, it gets put out. And you have a paper saying something happened. Where's the evidence? Where's the fact check? Where's the source? And we don't have that. And I'm not trying to defend President Trump, but if he says fake news, let's quit giving it to him. Let's be factual and do actual journalism so we can try to maybe tackle these impossible problems. Because for sure, all the access we have to information is not making us any wiser.
Right. I mean, look, I'm 50. You have children that are going to be young adults soon. And I might be a grandfather. The thing is, as I look at the 2050, 2070.
Yeah.
I look back and say, climate change, guys, got to do something, man.
Yeah.
Shootings, guys, got to do something. Eventually, this will just go too far, and I'm afraid that this country just may be going in the wrong direction until somebody finds a way to where they could still be in power and empower a nation. And by doing that, I think that's what truly makes us great. I'm telling you, one of the greatest days in the world for me was in the height of the tragedy. After 9/11, when I flew from Las Vegas to Burbank, that was the next, on what was it, September 12th. Scott might have had this experience, but that was a day where everybody gave a fuck and said, how you holding up? Held the elevator door for you.
Yeah.
Proud to be an American. And I knew, and every day that went by beyond 9/12, it'd be a little bit less and less and less till we kind of got back to how we were, which is we don't even say hi to each other anymore. Just walk by like we're fucking robots. That I will never forget 9/12, because that's when America was America, where we all band together, loved one another, hugged one another, and had each other's back. And I remember the saddest part about that day is looking in the sky and not seeing any aircraft.
Yeah, crazy.
It was bizarre. I wish I could bottle 9/12 for my kids and say that was a day, although it was the height of the tragedy, that was a day where we were America.
Yeah.
We cared. We found the empathy. Our hearts were full. And boy, I miss that experience for this country.
It was a very uniting time. Unfortunate circumstances, obviously. But yeah, I flew to Boston, I think, on that Friday. And it was everybody was checking in with everybody. Logan Airport was the generation for a couple of those flights. And everybody was just...
I remember George Bush held up this fireman badge. And I think he said something like, I'm a sensitive guy. And he kind of showed some emotion.
Yeah.
In that speech. And I said, you know what? That's my president.
Yeah.
I don't get caught up in all the politics of all this of presidents, but I just think showing that emotion in that moment, I needed somebody to put their arm around me and say, we're going to be okay. And he did that moment. That's something I'll never forget. It was unbelievable.
Yeah. I was deployed on that day. Yeah. I was overseas and just happened to be up late at night watching that event occur. And when the second plane hit, it just clicked terrorism, and I woke all the other lieutenants up, and we were on high alert so we didn't see that side of what you just described of Americans. And I've heard stories about that. It's heartwarming to hear that, and that's why I always think, since that day, what do we have to do? How much more tragedy do we have to endure as a nation to get back there, instead of finding a way to sustain that through leadership in politics, leadership in journalism. And I just want to say, your story, One Eye Jack, being a writer, being able to communicate like that, we share that same desire. you have to write something, you have to say something, you have to do something. Otherwise, nothing ever fucking
Well,
happens.
you cannot not write it is the issue. And I'll tell you another story. When I got off the aircraft, when George Bush and the FAA actually allowed you to fly again, I want to say it's maybe 5-6 days later.
Yeah.
I drove a car from Santa Clarita to Vegas, where I lived at the time, and then I flew from Southwest. I flew from Vegas to Burbank, and I'm telling you, not for nothing, on the flight there were 4 people. Because I remember them saying to me, the young lady was saying, "More coffee for the 4 of you?" It was the 4 of us. And when I landed at Burbank Airport, okay, what was interesting about that is I got out of the airport and I was going to take a cab to CSI.
Yeah.
We shot it in Santa Clarita. There was an elderly Muslim man with a turban on, and he got out of the car when I was walking with my bag towards the cab, and he lifted a small American flag. It was the most unbelievable moment. And I walked up to him because he was almost looking at me like, we're not the enemy. And he had a little American flag. I gave the guy a hug. It was unbelievable. And then he drove me there. And then I found out in Vegas the next day that there were Mediterranean restaurants that were being threatened and threatened to be bombed and that kind of thing. And I was like, oh, and you have a moment for 5 minutes with somebody, and then the next day it turns ugly because now people are communicating that, oh, well, because of that, all Mediterranean restaurants or European restaurants, it should be banned. And that's sad for a guy like me.
Yeah.
That's sad to do that.
Well, people are bad at people dying in general. We just don't respond well to it. And so some of us come out of that a little more compassionate, and some of us come out of it terrified, and
Yeah.
it's tough. Tell us about the Kickstarter thing again so everybody can.
Yeah, so it launched today, and it's called One-Eyed Jack. Again, it's 52 characters and 2 jokers about the shooting in Las Vegas. Stephen C. Paddock is the One-Eyed Jack. As you know, One-Eyed Jacks are wild. It's really a complete retrospective of Stephen Paddock's life right before the shooting, during the shooting, after he dies, follow him in death, and really look at the totality of his life on top of the entities of the NRA, the government, the media, Trump, bump stock companies, the casino industry, how everybody had a little bit of their hands in this, and what responsibility they had in this or didn't have in this, and looking at all of those entities and going, there's a little monster in all of these entities, not just blame one person. Sure, he's a monster, no question about it, but we have to be able to look at the complete picture, and inside of that, perhaps we can have a conversation about some of the fixes that need to happen in this country to be safe. And that's really what the story's about.
I can say, as someone who knows quite a bit about terrorism, when someone is going to go do something like this, they're most vulnerable in the planning phase because they've got to go do recce and they got to go look at the thing and acquire all these things. And so it can be something simple as Scott calling somebody or just paying attention, like putting eyes on someone who's doing something weird, like let them know that you see them. That might be the thing where they change target, and change target
Possibly.
could be cancel mission. So like Beck, what you said, just more awareness can be a big thing. You guys should definitely support Anthony's project. I know I'm going to go kick in for the Kickstarter.
I'm just glad we got this down. And again, we'd love to have you back on the show, talk more about other stuff, and then the success of One-Eyed Jack and where you're at on the project and other great stuff you got going on, man. And I'm just glad you're sharing the story. I'm glad to be your friend and to help out in one more way.
Thank you. There's a song about proud to be an American, and I am proud to live in this country.
Yeah.
I'm proud to be able to be a guy who drove a tram for $9 an hour at the Mirage Hotel and the Right One script and changed the world with CSI. I think CSI is a hopefully an entertaining deterrent that if you commit a crime, you can be caught and you will be caught because of the sanctity of forensic evidence. I think that's my contribution to the world. I had to write this because I had to do something. I'm not saying it'll change anything, but just even this podcast will make people more diligent. And if that's what this is going to do at its least form, then that's a victory. And if, One-Eyed Jack inspires young people to take a stand and get involved and be diligent, then that's how we change the world, sort of like one pencil stroke, one sentence at a time. And that's what it is.
It's another brick in the wall. You're going to do yours. I'll get this thing up as fast as I can, and we'll all make a difference together.
Right. It's a Breakdown Show, A to the Z. Thank you very much.